I think we often tend to talk about racism as this moral failure, or we shouldn't be racist because morally we're supposed to be good people. But it's not a moral failure, it's a political system that works and is designed to do this work. And we only see it in these extreme cases. So we think about it with March 15th. We think about it when there's really overt cases of police brutality somewhere. So people see that and say, oh yeah, that was clearly racist. But we don't necessarily look at our health outcomes, our educational outcomes, our access or lack of access to housing. And I think racism causes that. So I left Iran when I was 6, pretty much at the end of the Iran-Iraq war. My parents were political refugees. I grew up coming to a country not speaking any, not a single word of German. My parents didn't speak German. So all of those things are part of my biography that shaped when I was, becoming an adult and learning about inequality, I could make sense of. So I came to Aotearoa to do my PhD and got a scholarship to do it at the National Center for Peace and Conflict Studies in Dunedin, and then was encouraged to do a comparative study looking at New Zealand and Spain. My work looks at how white anti-racist activists or white anti-racist spaces actually also produce racism. I basically interviewed a bunch of activists in Spain and then people who work in treaty education, Pākehā treaty educators in New Zealand, and then looked for ways in which, I saw certain questions of white supremacy not being sufficiently addressed. So it's not that people aren't trying hard enough, it's just that where are the blind spots in the work that we do? What I found when I looked at these organizations, so in Spain I looked at civil society organizations, groups basically mainly looked at immigration as the main issue around racism in the country and how racism was targeting immigrants, and it was the unequal treatment of immigrants that was really the crux of the problem of racism. That really kind of negates that there is generations of people who have been in these European states who are people of color, but who have citizenship and hold these nationalities, so they're not necessarily newcomers or external others. And in Aotearoa it was slightly different because there is a real reckoning with the colonial past, and treaty work came out of that reckoning, and it is all about learning and teaching and addressing colonial violence. So I kind of use the findings in Aotearoa to contrast with, Spain, and say, well, this is kind of a little bit more advanced in terms of looking at the systems of white supremacy and the impact of colonialism in comparison to the work that was done in Spain. What the Rei Foundation enabled me to do with this research has been really life-changing because I've got this job that I have, and I managed to produce a series of writings that I'm really proud of and I think were important, and I feel wouldn't have been possible. Being able to pursue my PhD and having support from the Rei Foundation and having a foundation that recognized that my work was going to be valuable, that was important. I started researching how colonial monuments shape the way we think and feel about history, but also how they shape urban space and how memory really shapes form identity in the present, particularly national identity. I'm really interested in what are other ways of memorializing. Can we think of something else than just monuments, like these things that are tangible, concrete figures? So that's how I kind of started, and then it turned into more research about the perception, the resistance to monuments, and how we make sense of history. So I think when people say, if we remove, let's say, set statue to Captain Cook, it's an erasure of the history of the Pākehā people here. And I think that's a very simplistic way of thinking that we can't hold complex, contradictory information, and people don't realize that a lot of people, indigenous people here, minority groups inside Europe, have lived in erasure for a very long time, and acknowledging that we exist and that our holidays exist or that our histories exist. It's not an erasure, it's actually an adding on to or a more accurate depiction of that history.